Congressman, welcome back to the program here. The U.S. bombings on the Iranian nuclear facilities reportedly now only set that country back by a couple of months in its nuclear program. If the goal was to eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities, we didn't do that after all, it seems like. How concerning is that assessment to you?
Hey, Jason, thank you for having me back on. It's somewhat concerning, but I would say this, I spent 20 years in the intelligence community as a naval cryptologist with a top secret SCI clearance living in a skiff. Oftentimes, the initial intelligence report is just the scratch of the surface. We usually take weeks, if not months, before you get an extensive BDA bomb damage assessment of the situation. So for me, it's like, stay tuned. Let's wait till we get all the facts. But the bottom line is we cannot allow Iran to ever get a nuclear weapon. And if that sets them back months or years, I think it's very important that they never have access to it, because they've proven, with their words and with their actions, that they're willing to attack their neighbors and they're willing to attack American interests.
The Trump administration, Congressman, rescheduled a classified briefing about what happened for members of Congress. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I can't get into the details on a lot of these things, but what I can say is this, Jason. Oftentimes, these classified briefings for members of Congress aren't as classified as you think they are. Because I wouldn't tell a member of Congress anything that I don't think that they're going to go and tell the press immediately right afterwards, right? So it sounds like these really sexy, juicy behind the scenes thing, and oftentimes all you're getting is a reiteration of the New York Times or whatever's already been
Yeah.
reported via open source. So that I'll leave it there.
Iran said right after this happened that it had already moved its enriched uranium, that there was nothing at the sites that the U.S. bombed. What do you make of that?
That wouldn't surprise me. But some initial reports have been there hasn't been any radiation from some of the sites.
Right.
So those are some things that I'd look at. But once again, it's all about need to know, and the folks that need to know are not going to be the ones that are going to be talking about it, right? Good, bad, or ugly. So this is where I trust the president of the United States. I trust President Trump. I think others should trust him as well. And we should really lean on our military apparatus and our intelligence community to give us a full, long scope of what's happening. But we really have to track this daily, weekly, monthly, and make sure that the end result is, in fact, Iran not having access to nuclear weapons.
Congressman, if the U.S. bombing of Iran the other day only set that country back by a few months, it seems like the goal here is not done yet. Do you think that we might be getting into a wider war here and have more bombing campaigns against that country?
Jason, I do worry about that. I spent 20 years in the military. I spent 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. America historically, and oh, by the way, our troops they did an amazing job executing that mission.
Sure.
But it's never been a problem of the United States getting into wars. It's always been a problem with us getting out of wars. So, what I'm looking for President Trump is to really lean on his generals and his admirals for an exit strategy. I think you've already seen his willingness to do this, right? Let's get to a peace, let's get to a ceasefire, let's get to a peace deal, let's move on. I think that is very important. I have no interest in another endless war, but I also don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. I think the balance is what I'm looking for, and a lot of other Americans are looking for, and I trust President Trump will get us to that balance.
But if the enriched uranium was moved by Iran prior to the bombings, and our bombings maybe just destroyed factories and didn't set that country back that far, it would seem like the U.S. might still be interested in getting rid of Iran's nuclear capabilities, right? I mean, it's if that was the goal, then this is not over with, it seems like.
I don't think it's ever over with. I mean, it's one of these games of cat and mouse, if you will. But if Iran, let's just say Iran is moving their material from one spot to another,
Yeah.
then you're likely moving it from a secure location to a less or unsecure location, which in itself opens itself up for opportunities to be destroyed or tampered with, or however you want to look at it. So and once again, a lot of times, the real meat and potatoes of the situation will never be public. But the fact that Iran is saying that they're moving it around, To me, that tells me they're worried. They were worried about something, and where that ends up, I think is still for us, still for us to figure out.
Congressman, how concerned are you that Iran might retaliate against the U.S.?
I'm very concerned. This week I had on the Appropriations Committee, I had the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, testify before me, and I asked her flat out how many Iranian sleeper cells are in the United States. Now, I didn't get an exact number, but what I did get was DOJ is concerned. Their DOJ, Department of Justice, is on high alert. And so what that tells me is if DOJ is on high alert, we should be on high alert as well. Meaning, don't think for a second that what happened overseas can happen here in our backyard. So if you see something, say something. We have to make sure that we're policing our communities and making sure we're getting ahead of any problems. I don't want to see what happened in 9/11 happen again. And part of that is us being vigilant.
How likely is that compared to maybe a cyber attack that Iran could launch against us?
Cyber attacks, I spent 20 years as a cryptologist, a naval cryptologist. Cyber attacks are a little more nasty because it's harder to put the fingerprints on who conducted the cyber attack. So if you're an adversary of the United States, this is a perfect opportunity to conduct a cyber attack and pin it on Iran, right? Because everyone's going, oh yeah, Iran did it, Right. So this is one of the things that we need to be really careful with. That's why I introduced a piece of legislation that essentially protects and arms us. My argument is if there's a cyber attack and the power gets turned off, who's going to turn the power back on? It cannot just be the feds. I think locally and at the state level, in Texas especially, we have the expertise within our communities. If you're in Dallas, Dallas should turn its own lights back on. If you're in San Antonio or Houston or Austin, I think each city has their own capabilities. That's exactly what the bill does. It essentially empowers local cyber experts to operate in a federal capacity for a limited amount of time to help turn the power back on. But these cyber threats are very real, Jason.
And that you reintroduced that bill, right? Didn't you have that last Congress?
I did. I've reintroduced this bill and will continue to work on it till it gets over the finish line.
I remember we talked about that once before. Let's switch topics here and talk about the ICE roundups and border crossings as well. You have the widest swath of border in your district than anyone else in Congress. The Trump administration has gotten illegal border crossings down to zero, essentially, it seems like now. What kind of impact are you seeing in your district?
It's been night and day. I represent 2/3 of the Texas-Mexico border. It was absolute chaos for years on end. And it's a breath of fresh air to essentially have some of that chaos stop. And you're having people, in my district and other parts of Texas, they're talking about lack of water and they're talking about screwworms. If you ask me what the number one issue is out in West Texas, I'll tell you it's the threat of screwworms coming into to Texas and wiping out our beef and our sheep and goat industries. And so I think that's where the shift is. No longer is it border, border, border. That has been secured. It's now these other, more kitchen table issues.
Congressman, let me ask you about being in South Texas with the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, recently. You mentioned the screwworm a moment ago, but this could be very dangerous if this fly leaves Mexico and gets into the U.S. Livestock populations. I mean, it could decimate the beef industry, chicken industry, and others, couldn't it?
This is a real threat. And, it's happened before where this parasite essentially, infects let's say a cow and kills it. And so what happens when that happens, when occurs at scale, then all of a sudden you have an industry that is wiped out, literally billions of dollars that would be wiped out. Ag industry is so important to Texas. I wrote a letter. I wrote a bipartisan letter. It's over 40 members of Congress. Jason, you can't get 3 members of Congress to cross the street together at the same time to have lunch. I got over 40 members of Congress. This was months ago to talk about screwworms to the secretary. And you know what? She listened. She picked up the phone. We had a great conversation. Now let's fast forward a few months. The Secretary of Agriculture has put $8.5 million into a facility out in South Texas. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I put $10 million towards this screwworm issue. I also dropped another piece of legislation long-term that creates our own facility here in Texas, a little bit bigger price tag of 300 million. But once again, this is how we get ahead of a problem, not wait until, screwworms have prevented us from having steaks on Friday and burgers on Saturday. We get ahead of it and we protect our industries.
And for clarity, how will that facility help against this deadly parasite?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. They raise sterile flies and then they take these flies and they drop them in areas so that way the fly, if you sterilize the fly, it prevents it from carrying the parasite further. So it's a way like a barrier, if you will, to get ahead of it.
Congressman, always good to see you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Jason.